In this video, we're going to learn how to divide decimals by whole number. Doing long division, you always start on the left side here. Now we need to figure out a number that when you multiply it by, you get 6, or something reasonably close to 6. Well, we know that 3 times 2 is equal to 6, so we put that number down here. Okay, now we subtract 6 by 6, that's going to give us 0. When we have a decimal place, we'd still drop down that number here, but you notice that there's a decimal that's still. So that decimal is going to go right there. It falls in line with the decimal in our equation. Now we got 2 and 2. So what do we multiply to get to 2? Well, 1 times 2 is equal to 2. We subtract that, we have a remainder of 0. So our answer is 3.1. Moving on to the next equation, again, we always start on the left side, but this time we have 1. Okay, well, 1 is smaller than 2, so there's nothing that we can divide that by, so we have to put a 0. So 0 times 2 is 0. If we subtract that, 1 minus 0 is 1, and we bring down that 5. Now again, we have a decimal place that is in line right here, so we're going to put that decimal place there. Now, what do we multiply 15 by to get 2? Well, we can't do 15 exactly, but the closest number is 7, and we always want a number that's always less than. So we know that 7 times 2 is 14. We'll subtract that out, and we get a 1. Now that's number 1.5. We can always put a 0 in here, right? It still stays the same 1.5, even with that 0. So you can put that 0, and we bring that 0 down. Now we got 10. How many times does 10 go into 2? And that's going to be 5 times. If we subtract that, that's going to be 0. And our answer is 0.75. Moving on to 2 digits, again, we always start on the left side. There's a 0 right here, right? Because 2 is less than 3. So 0 times 3 is going to be 0. We subtract that out, then we get 2. We drop down that 4. Now we have 24. We know that goes into 3 8 times, because 8 times 3 is equal to 24. We subtract that, we have 0. But again, we have this decimal place, which we keep in line here. We drop down that 3 now. How many times does 3 go into 3? That's 1 time. We get a 3 here. And then we get a 0. We drop down our 6. If we do that, we get 6. How many times does 6 go into 3? That's 2 times. So our answer is 8.12. Moving on to this equation, again, 2 is less than 5, so that means we have a 0 here. We can put our decimal place here. 5 times 0 is 0. If we subtract that, we get 2. Then we get a 3 because we're going to drop down that 3. So how many times does 5 go into 23? That is going to be 4 times, because 4 times 5 is 20, which gives us a remainder of 3. And if we know that we're always correct, because if the remainder is less than the value here, that's what we need. Okay, now we drop down the 5. We're going to get 35. How many times does 5 go into 35? That's 7 times. If we subtract that out, we'll get a remainder of 0. So our answer is 0.47. Moving on to 3 digits, again, we always start on the left side. So how many times does 5 go into 5? That's going to be 1 time. 1 times 5 is 5. We subtract that, we're going to get 0. We drop down that 9 here. So how many times does 9 go into 5? That's still going to be 1 time, right? 1 times 5 is 5. That gives us a remainder of 4. And remember, we always want a remainder that's less than the value that we're dividing by. Okay, we have our decimal here, which we keep in line with the decimal in the equation. And now we drop down this 3. So how many times does 43 go into 5? That's going to be 8 times. 8 times 5 is 40. And if we subtract that, we get a remainder of 3. Now we want to drop down the 7. If we do that, now how many times does 5 go into 37? And that's going to be 7 times, because 7 times 5 is 35. We subtract that, now we get a 2. We drop down our 5. How many times does 5 go into 25? And that's going to be 5 times. If we subtract that, we get a remainder of 0. So our answer is 11.875. Moving on to this one, again, we start on the left side. How many times does 3 go into 3? That's 1 times. That gives us 3 times 1. If we subtract that, now we get 0. We drop down this 2. Now 2 is less than 3, so we can't divide that by. So that has to be 0. So 0 times 3 is 0. We subtract that. We're going to get 2. We drop down to 4. Okay, now we got 24. How many times does that go in? That's going to be 8 times. That's going to be 24 here. Now we got 0. We put our decimal here. We drop down that 1, so now we have 1. Again, we can't divide that because that's too small. So now we're going to subtract by 0, right? Because 0 times 3 is 0. Now we have 1 and a 2. We know that's going to be 4 times. That gives us 12. Now we have a remainder of 0. Drop down this 3. I'm running out of room. How many times does 3 go into 3? And that's going to be 1 time. The answer is 108.041.